Week 5 of the fantasy football season. Here's wide receivers start sit every matchup this week. San Francisco 49ers at the Los Angeles Rams. Ricky Pearsall, he's banged up right now with a knee injury. He didn't practice on Monday, is Ricky Pearsall, but we'll see if he goes out there and plays on Thursday night. If not, they could be down both their wide receivers, but if Pearsall's in the lineup, he's the number one target right now in the offense with George Kittle out. Brock Purdy banged up with the toe as well. We'll see if he plays. And this is a division matchup on Thursday night. So Pearsall, if he goes, he's a start. Jawan Jennings, he's a fringe option. He's had a couple good games, couple bad games so far this season, but he's been banged up with a shoulder injury and other ailments as well is Jawan Jennings. So this week in a matchup at the Los Angeles Rams where it could be a high-scoring game, and Thursday night games usually are. Even if he plays, he's a fringe option. Puka Nacua, best receiver in fantasy football. Easily, right now, he's a must-start. Devontae Adams going out there. Seems like weekly he's scoring a touchdown. He's getting peppered with targets. He's a must-start as well. Minnesota Vikings at the Browns, another international game Sunday morning. Justin Jefferson is start. Him and Carson Wentz starting to get things going. Jefferson had his best game of the season last week in the tough loss versus Steelers in Double Island. And Justin Jefferson, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. But I've said in other videos, I think Wentz is better overall for fantasy purposes for this offense than J.J. McCarthy. Jordan Addison, a fringe option. If it wasn't for that big catch down the sidelines where he almost took it to the house for 80 yards, it wasn't going to be a big game for Jordan Addison, but it was good to see him return from suspension. He had a good ball game, no doubt about it. But this week in a matchup versus stingy defense of the Cleveland Browns, Jordan Addison to me is a fringe option. Jerry Jeudy is sit in this one. Jeudy got off to a decent start in last week's game and then disappeared. The majority of the ball game is Jeudy, and there's no one really you could trust on this offense week in and week out besides Quinshawn Junkins, Dallas Cowboys. At the New York Jets, George Pickens took over as the number one wide receiver with CeeDee Lamb out, and he didn't disappoint with a monster game, over 130 yards and 2 TDs. And this week in a matchup where Sauce Gardner most likely is going to be covering him majority of the game, I don't think it's going to be a problem, and this could be a high-scoring game between two defenses that can't stop anyone. He's a start. Jalen Tolbert, Conte Turpin, assists. Tolbert definitely someone to own in 12-team leagues or deeper. He's going to get his targets, 6-7 targets per game. Good possession wide receiver. Him and Dak have a good rapport. But this week, even with the bye weeks, he's a sit. And Keontae Turpin, still that gadget guy, not going to get a lot of snaps and a lot of route participation, even though he's the third wide receiver now. So he's a sit. Garrett Wilson, pretty much the only option in the passing game for New York. And this week, in a matchup versus a Cowboys secondary that's been torched all season long, Wilson a must-start. New York Giants at the New Orleans Saints, now with Malik Neighbors out for the season, torn ACL. We'll see who steps up for this New York Giant team. But right now, even in a good matchup, Wandale Robinson, Darius Slayton, I don't trust them. Definitely guys to be owned, obviously in 12-team leagues or deeper, where someone's going to have to catch the football for this Giant team with the rookie Jackson Dart. But like I said, these guys haven't been consistent week in and week out throughout their NFL career. Even though I know Robinson, a couple games of the season, went out there, had some games, but he's a sit. Chris Olave a start, getting peppered with targets. Last week was a down game and a touchdown, bailed out Chris Olave in that one at the Buffalo Bills. But this week versus a Giants secondary that's had trouble all season long with wideouts, he's a start. Rashid Shaheed is sit. Shaheed, he's been a fringe option here and there over the last couple of weeks, but now 2 games in a row failed to reach double-digit fantasy points. Chris Olave, Jawan Johnson, and even obviously Kamara out of the backfield are better options in this passing game, where pretty much Shaheed's the fourth option. Vegas Raiders at the Indianapolis Colts, Jacoby Myers a start. Last week it was a down game for him, and it was the Ashton Ginty show as well, where Ginty had 3 touchdowns and did everything for this Raider offense, even though it was a tough loss versus Chicago Bears. But this week in Indianapolis, where this could be a high-scoring game, possibly between these two teams, I think Myers gets back on track, and Geno Smith, he's got to get the rapport down and the timing down. Kobe Myers and Brock Bowers, where interceptions have been a big problem for him. Trey Tucker sit. I think that week 3 game at Washington, where they were trailing by a few scores and Geno Smith just put it up for grabs and tried to hit deep balls, that's where Tucker had the big game. So definitely someone to still be owned in 12-team leagues or deeper. But weekly, if he's not catching that deep ball, I don't think Tucker's going to have much value. He's a sit. Michael Pittman a start. It's been a bounce-back big year for Michael Pittman this year with Daniel Jones in their quarterback, and it just shows how bad this offense was obviously with Anthony Richardson. So Pittman, good route runner still, could make some plays yard after catch. And this week versus a Raider defense that can't stop anyone, he's a start. Josh Downs a sit. I thought Josh Downs as well would benefit with Daniel Jones in their quarterback, but this season Downs, he just hasn't done much for this Indianapolis Colts team. Much not ownable in most fantasy leagues. He's a sit. Miami Dolphins at the Carolina Panthers. Now Tyreek Hill, he's out for the season and possibly most of next season as well with the dislocated knee and knee ligament damage. And Jalen Waddle, he's going to step in as the number one wide receiver as Waddle. And so far this season, it's been a mixed bag of results. Touchdowns have saved a couple of his weeks in week 2 and 3 for Waddle. And last week, he had a quiet ball game with only 7.8 fantasy points in PPR leagues. But this week in a good matchup at the Panthers, and now going to be operating as the number one wide receiver over here from Miami. He's a start. Malik Washington, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, they're both sits for me. Malik Washington, he's been a gadget guy in the offense all season long. Obviously, his snaps most likely going to go up, and they're going to try to get his speed in the open field as well, Malik Washington. But like I said, he's not someone I would start this week, but someone definitely be owned. 10-team leagues or deeper. And Nick Westbrook-Ikhine last season, he had 9 touchdowns out of the 32 catches he had was Westbrook-Ikhine. He's a big target. He's a guy that's got touchdown ability and a red zone threat. But him as well, 12-team leagues or deeper, he should be owned. But we got to see how this offense shakes out and who steps up as the number 2 wideout. And now to Carolina, pretty much nothing much going on over there. Chuba Hubbard, Tedora McMillan, the only 2 options in this offense. Coker possibly could return in this ball game, but I don't think he'd be on 100% ready to go, play a lot of snaps. So McMillan to start in this one where he's going to get peppered with targets, and the Panthers most likely will be trailing a majority of this game. Denver Broncos at the Eagles. Cortland Sutton after a bad week 2 versus the Colts. The last 2 weeks he's gone out there and he put up numbers. Him and Bo Nix are locked in. He's the number 1 option in this passing game for Denver, and even in a tougher matchup at a good secondary of Philadelphia, he's a start. Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin are both sits. Mims, he had a nice game last week, but that was a Cincinnati Bengal defense, and Mims, 1 good week, 1 bad week. Patterns have been for him in the early going, so he's not a guy I really would trust even with these bye weeks. He's a sit. Troy Franklin, he had a pop game in week 2 in Indianapolis. Week 3, he didn't do much, and then last week he had a decent game. Was Franklin, and him and Nix just missed on a deep ball. Would have been a big game for him, but this week he's a sit. Philadelphia Eagles, A.J. Brown a start. It's been a down year, no doubt about it. This offense doesn't like throwing the football a lot, especially when they lead. It's pretty much Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts running the football, and that's what we saw last week at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But A.J. Brown, we saw what he's capable of. Week 3, he had the big game and the come-from-behind victory. And this week, yes, he's going to most likely draw Patrick Surtain a majority of the game. But A.J. Brown, we know he's a big-time wide receiver. And if you bench a guy like that and then he goes off on your bench, it's going to be a problem. So he's definitely going to be lower in my rankings, but still, especially with the bye weeks, a guy that's a starting option. Devonta Smith, he's a fringe option. I think he's definitely taken worse of a hit this season than A.J. Brown here. Smith last season was 4th option on this offense. And once again, he's the 4th option, where I believe Dallas Goedert at times is ahead of him, where we saw him last week score 2 touchdowns in that game. Dallas Goedert. It's Devonta Smith. If he's not making a big play, pretty much his fantasy value hasn't been much over the last 2 seasons since Barkley signed with this Eagle team. Houston Texans at the Ravens. Nico Collins a start. He's the number 1 option in the passing game. I know the numbers haven't been first-round pick numbers for Collins, where it's been decent numbers, but besides that 1 big game for Collins in week 3 at Jacksonville, we haven't seen much from Collins, but he's a start each and every week. Jaden Higgins, Christian Kirk is sits. I know Higgins had a touchdown, but it was only 1 catch for 24 yards, found the end zone last week. He's got to see more targets. He's got to make more plays for me to put him in the starting lineup. And Christian Kirk, I know he's still working his way back. Only his 2nd game it was as a Houston Texan, but I think his better years are behind him. And this offense, they don't want Stroud really throwing the football 40, 45 times. And if he does, it's been Nico Collins and Schultz getting a majority of the targets. Zay Flowers, he's a start in this one. Flowers, one of the better receivers in the early going in fantasy football. We know Lamar, he might not play in this game. We have to see his status as the week goes on with the hamstring injury. But if it is Cooper Rush, he's a capable quarterback. We've seen CeeDee Lamb over the last couple of years when Rush started at times still put up numbers, and I think Flowers, if Rush is in there, still could do the same. Rashad Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins are sits. These guys are pretty much touchdown dependent wide receivers, where Mark Andrews is the number 2 option in the passing game. And obviously, As well, you got Derrick Henry in the backfield and Justice Hill, who's been a good receiving back out of the backfield. So Bateman and Hopkins, like I said, if they're not scoring TDs, they're not fantasy options. Their sits Tennessee Titans at the Arizona Cardinals. Calvin Ridley, Alec Maynard, both sits. Ridley, he's pretty much been non-existent all season long. It's been a bust of a year. Him and Cam Ward can't get on the same page. And Ayo Maynard, he's another wide receiver that's touchdown dependent. Definitely a wideout to be owned in 12-team leagues or deeper, but obviously not someone I'm going to have confidence in the starting lineup. Even with the bye weeks, Marvin Harrison Jr. start. Last week, it looked like another bad game it was going to be for Marvin Harrison on Thursday night, where his route running wasn't great and he dropped a couple passes. But then in the late third quarter, fourth quarter, he got things going. So this week in a matchup where Tennessee has had trouble all season long stopping teams, he's a start. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Seahawks. Emeka Egbuka, he's been great in his rookie season. And obviously with Mike Evans out, more targets are going to be there. We saw last week he hit on a big 77-yard touchdown with Egbuka. And this week in a matchup versus decent defense of Seattle, I still think Egbuka is matchup proof. And him and Baker are locked in. Chris Godwin, a fringe option. He did have 10 targets, which was great to see in last week's game, but definitely a step slower, still getting his legs under him after a devastating injury last season that cost Godwin his year early in the season. But it was surprising to see him back already in week 4. And as the weeks go on, obviously he's going to build up endurance, get his legs under him, and get back to the player he was. But right now, to me, he's a fringe option. Jackson Smith-Njigba, he's locked in weekly as a start. Last week it was a slow start for him, and he still finished up with about 13 fantasy points in PPR leagues. And this week in a matchup versus Tampa Bay, where their defense has had problems stopping receivers, he's a start. Cooper Kupp a sit. I think the best years might be behind Cooper Kupp, unfortunately, where he'll have a good game here and there, but right now this offense is pretty much Jackson Smith-Njigba, Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet, and A.J. Barner we've seen get involved over the last few weeks and find the end zone. So Cooper Kupp, like I said, he's not a top option in this offense, and his ceiling just isn't that high. Detroit Lions at the Bengals. Amon-Ra St. Brown locked in weekly as a start. Week in, week out, he's going to put up numbers. And this week in a great matchup at Cincinnati, he could be a top performer at the position. Jameson Williams is a fringe option, and I've said it a lot this season. He's pretty much been a deep all or nothing is Jameson Williams. In the last couple weeks, he's been bottled up, and the numbers haven't been there. So even in a great matchup at Cincinnati, he's a fringe option. Jamar Chase is start. I know the last 2 weeks, the numbers haven't been there with Jake Browning in their quarterback, but this is going to be another game where they're going to be trailing early and often and have to put points on the board, and their best chance is to get the football to Jamar Chase. So we saw him and Zach Taylor have some words where he wanted the football on Monday Night Football after a key third down they couldn't convert. So Jamar Chase, I think the game plan is just pepper him with targets is going to be from now on and see if he can help them win these ball games. T. Higgins, a fringe option. Obviously, his value took a major hit as well with Jake Browning in the lineup. Him and Browning couldn't hit on a couple deep balls that were close on Monday night. And this week, yes, they're going to be trailing most likely versus good Lion team. But Higgins, I don't think the upside is great as well. Commanders at the Chargers. Terry McLaurin, as of now, is trending in the right direction of playing in this ball game. So Scary Terry, if he plays, he's going to be a start. Looks like Jaden Daniels is going to return to the lineup as well, which is good for this Commander team, where it could have been obviously a season-ending type injury. So only missed 2 games. The way he got landed on that ankle was a good thing, obviously, for this Commander team. So if he's in the lineup, which it looks like he'll be, Terry McLaurin to start. Deebo Samuel, I've said it a lot in videos as well, where he was operating in training camp when McLaurin was holding out for his new deal as the number 1 wide receiver. And he's picked up this playbook pretty quickly, and he looks like Deebo of old, where he's explosive and making plays. He's a start. Luke McCaffrey a sit. Not enough volume is going to be there for Luke McCaffrey. I know 2 weeks in a row he found the end zone, but especially if McLaurin comes back and in a tougher matchup at Los Angeles, he's a sit. Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnson, their starts. Both these receivers weekly are going out there putting up points. I know Keenan had a down game last week, 7.8 fantasy points. But this secondary of the Commanders, they really can't stop anyone, it seems like, this season, even with Marshawn Lattimore in their secondary. So this week, both these receivers are starts. Ladd McConkey, a fringe option for me, 3 games in a row now. He's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points. Last week, only 1 catch for 11 yards. I think McConkey could turn things around. But like I said, Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnson right now are the top options in this passing game. And obviously, Amari Hampton the last 2 weeks has broken out. in the backfield. Now to the final two games of the week. Sunday night, New England Patriots at the Buffalo Bills. Stephon Diggs back versus one of his former teams, where him and Josh Allen obviously had a bad falling out where they traded him away a couple off seasons ago to Houston. So Diggs is a start. Last week, finally a big game it was for Diggs, 6 for 106. And the juices are going to be flowing. They're going to want to get him the football a little bit earlier. And this Patriot team, for the most part, has been playing good this season. So this is a big division matchup as well. And remember, Diggs is coming off the ACL. So maybe right now he's almost at 100%. Kayshon Boutte, besides week 1 and finding the end zone in week 2, he hasn't been a fantasy option. He's a sick. Khalil Shakir, a start for me in this one. 2 weeks in a row finding the end zone. And I said this early in the season. To me, he could be that number 1 option in the passing game, him and Dalton Kincaid. And besides a big week 1 for Keon Coleman, he hasn't done much. So he's a sit in this game. This Patriot defense, for the most part, has been a stout, bend but don't break type of unit. And Joshua Palmer, I thought he would be doing more this season as well, but he's pretty much been a third wide receiver and not getting targets. And Monday night, Kansas City Chiefs at the Jaguars, Xavier Worthy a start. He returned to the lineup last week. He looked explosive. He was making plays. And they don't got to do much to get Worthy a ball in space where he could go out there and have a fantasy day week in and week out. So this week in a matchup at Jacksonville, where I don't think their defense really is that good, he's a start. Hollywood Brown, a fringe option. He had a touchdown last week, which saved his day, 3 for 38, and found the end zone was Hollywood Brown. But Travis Kelce, still number 2 option in this passing game, I believe. Rashee Rice, he'll be returning in a couple weeks now from his suspension. With Brown, he won't really have value, but this week in a good matchup at Jacksonville and with teams on bye, he's a fringe option. Juju Smith-Schuster, Tyquan Thornton both found the end zone in last week's game. But pretty much these guys are third, fourth wide receivers, obviously, in the receiving room. They're touchdown-dependent wide receivers as well. And this week, even in a good matchup at the Jaguars, it's Brian Thomas Jr. a start. Last week was his best game of the year, 5 catches, 49 yards, and he had a rush for 7 yards. And that's obviously not a good thing here for Brian Thomas, but he's going to get his targets. Him and Brenton Strange, pretty much the only 2 guys on this offense weekly that target's going to be there. And Travis Hunter's a sit where pretty much he's playing both ways, is Travis Hunter, and he's not getting consistent snaps at the wide receiver position. So he's a sit this week. So that's wide receiver start, sit every matchup for week 5 of the fantasy football season.